It's so easy to be average. It takes a little something to be special, doesn't it? It takes a little something special to be a great player. Did you push yourself to be great today?
Yeah. The man of Scarlet and Gray. Yeah.
Let's go.
The man of Scarlet and Gray. What we reading now? Who we listen to? Who we rockin' with hard?
The man of Scarlet and Gray.
Who we vibing with? Who we riding with? Who we clapping for love?
The man of Scarlet and Gray.
What we reading now? Who we listen to? Who we rockin' with hard?
The man of Scarlet and Gray.
Who we vibing with? Who we riding with? Who we clapping for love?
The man of Scarlet and Gray.
It's time for it. You ready for it? It's my time. You better know it. It's go Bucks. Every time. Hating on us, you better get
Your undisputed source of all things Ohio State. This is the Men of the Scarlet and Gray Podcast. Here's your hosts, Shannon Summers and Chip Minnick.
The man of Scarlet and Gray.
Buckeye Nation, welcome to another great edition of Men of the Scarlet and Gray here on Buckeye Sports Radio, a V-Sporto channel. I'm your host, Chip Minnick, writer and editor for menofthescarletandgray.com. I'm honored to be joined by my co-host, Shannon Summers, also a fellow writer and editor for menofthescarletandgray.com. Shannon, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great today. We got a win in the outhouse. We're down to 360 days of pure bliss.
Technically, we're at, right now, since I've got the clock right by me, it's 359 days, but who's counting?
Oh, we're just going to keep adding.
Exactly. So we are ready to do another great podcast for our listeners, as we will be discussing in great detail Ohio State's victory over that team up north. Speaking for myself, you just heard it from Shannon. We're still basking in the 42-13 victory, and I hope all Ohio State fans everywhere are doing the same. In addition, Shannon and I will discuss the latest college football playoff rankings and assess what chances the Buckeyes have to make the playoffs. Lastly, Shannon and I will answer the questions that have been submitted for our Ask Motsag session. Before we get into our podcast, we wanted to remind you about the Buckeye Sports Radio app available on your favorite iOS or Android devices. I have it on my iPhone, and I know Shannon uses it on his Android. It's a must-have for any Buckeye fan who wants the latest and greatest Ohio State news and information.
After further review.
Barrett in his shotgun with Elliott on his right-hand side. 2nd and 10, Ohio State at their own 24. Van Nett motioning behind the line. Snap to J.T. Barrett. Feeds it Elliott. Sweeping left side to the 25, to the 30. 35-40. Hits the 50. Down the left sideline to the Michigan 40. To the 30 of the Wolverines. To the 20. And he's going to be dragged down inside the 15. Van Nett motioning from behind the line. Snap to J.T. Barrett. Hands it. No, he keeps it. Runs it straight ahead. Lugs a couple of defenders into the end zone for a touchdown. Barrett on a 7-yard run. J.T. Barrett. He had defensive lineman Willie Henry trying to stop him, but Barrett ends up scoring on the touchdown run, his 9th of the season. Shotgun formation. Barrett gets the snap. Gives it to Elliott, who shoots straight ahead and waltzes into the end zone. Ezekiel Elliott on a 5-yard touchdown run, his 18th rushing TD of the season. He requested, and he got it. 1st and 10, Buckeyes at the Wolverine 25. Barrett back to throw, looking, tosses, right corner of the end zone for Jalen Marshall. Catches while being molested, comes down with a ball for the score. Jalen Marshall with a defender draped all over him. Delano Hill, but a 25-yard touchdown pass to Jalen Marshall, who catches it under duress. And Ohio State's lead grows to 20-10. J.T. Barrett in a shotgun all by himself. Now motioning behind him is one of his setbacks, but Barrett's going to run it himself straight ahead to the 10. Right angle to the 5. Dives and gets to the end zone. J.T. Barrett on a 13-yard touchdown run. His 2nd rushing touchdown of the afternoon. And it's 27-10 Ohio State. Barrett in a shotgun. Elliott to his left. Barrett gets the quick snap. Feeds it Elliott, who shoots straight ahead and pushes it into the end zone. Ezekiel Elliott on a 9-yard touchdown run. And with just under 13 minutes to play in the 4th quarter, the lead has grown to 34-13 for Ohio State. Elliott to his left. Barrett gets the snap. Barrett's going to keep it going left side. He's to the Michigan 15, to the 10, to the 5, and to the end zone. J.T. Barrett, 17-yard touchdown run. Taking it the left side, his third rushing touchdown of the day. J.T. Barrett. And Ohio State's lead is 41-13 over Michigan. 2nd and 10, Michigan. Ball at their own 48. Spate back to pass. Throws a pass. It's to
Joey!
And grabbed by Joey Bosa, who runs down the left side. Bosa to the 15, to the 10, and the quarterback Spate takes him down at the 10. And Joey Bosa reached in the air, slapped at the football, and grabbed it and ran it down inside the red zone. First down. Ohio State with the ball at the Michigan side of the field. One knee by Barrett, and that's it. Another pair of gold pants coming to this group of Ohio State football players as the Buckeyes defeat Michigan 42-13.
All right, let's get into the Ohio State victory over that team up north.
Wait, hold on.
Go
Let's
ahead.
no longer classify this as a victory. Can we? Can we just put a squash to this since this is one of the biggest wins in history?
Well, that's what I was gonna address that at the tail end. Some historical anecdotes that a lot of our listeners may not necessarily be aware of.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely get into those, but it's just that was a major can of butt whooping that was opened up, and it was glorious.
Absolutely. I mean, well, the way it started out prior to the game, the announcement came through that, or I should say on Twitter, it wasn't much of an announcement. News came out that offensive line coach and co-offensive coordinator Ed Warner, for the first time this season, was going to be up in the press box next to co-offensive coordinator and quarterback coach Tim Beck. The game kind of started off rather slow, with both teams trading punts on their respective possessions. What I thought was a critical play in the first in the first quarter, was Ohio State was pinned back deep, and a roughing the punter penalty was assessed on that team up north that kept the Ohio State drive alive in the first quarter. 2 plays later, Ezekiel Elliott ran for 66 yards to the Wolverine 10-yard line. J.T. Barrett scored on a 7-yard touchdown run 2 plays later to put Ohio State up 7-0. Ohio State never trailed in this game. What were your thoughts at that point?
Well, watching the way everything was unfolding, and we were talking last week, the way Urban came out and said he's taking more control of the offense, you've seen a more animated Urban on the sidelines, even though they kept wanting to go to the press box. And he was getting frustrated with, let's go, rhythm, let's go, pick it up, let's go now. And you've seen all of a sudden it start snowballing. The rhythm started going, and once it started going, there was no stopping it. That roughing the punter penalty, Chesson, I believe it was, and I forget who the other dude was that actually did the penalty, but you seen the way Chesson dove away from it and avoided contact, and the other dude just right towards the leg. It was clear. Punt, the exact turning point, but it was just got him out of the end zone. Zeke just he put the Wolverines in the rearview mirror, basically. He took the game over and did what he was supposed to do. The offensive line, huge holes. I mean, they just something that they couldn't do last week, the Michigan State game, but they did this week, and they just they tore the Maize and Blue apart, and it was great.
Well, something that were you ever concerned at the half? Ohio State, the Wolverines were able to get on the board with a field goal. Ohio State answers with a touchdown. The Wolverines, right before the first half concluded, they scored a touchdown. So they were up 14-10. What were your thoughts at the half? Were you ever concerned? Were you ever feeling, okay, this is going to be a battle to the end? Were you thinking that momentum was switching over to that team up north? What were your thoughts at the half?
Well, it's funny. I went and hung out with a bunch of friends I haven't seen in a while to watch the game. Usually tradition, we try to all get together once a year, especially watch the game. And we're sitting there and we're talking and going through everything and discussing what's going on during the season and everything. And we go into the locker room with the 4-point lead. Just something was nagging at me that really wasn't a fear. Maybe it's just a confidence in Urban Meyer, and I've always stated and thought, and until the day I'm proven wrong, I've always thought Jim Harbaugh is, while he might be a good coach, he's not a great coach, and he's overrated. So I didn't think really that Michigan had it in them in order to come back against Ohio State. I don't think they had the caliber players. I don't think they had enough talent. I mean, Jabril Peppers, they were having a hard time stopping him sometimes. Their offense wasn't moving up and down the field with any kind of ease, so there wasn't any kind of rhythm or continuity with their offense against our defense. So I really wasn't worried about them unless we made a mistake and they were able to capitalize on it. And fortunately, there was no mistake for Ohio State in order for them to capitalize on it.
One of the things that was somewhat disconcerting at the end of the first half, not taking anything away from, I thought the overall offensive execution, as you mentioned, was much better than Ohio State fans had seen, not only against Michigan State, but for a lot of the season. What was somewhat disconcerting was it seemed as though in the first half, Jake Rudock was, I don't want to say that he was completing passes easily, but it seemed like there was minimal defensive pressure on Jake Rudock. And as we discussed the second half, it certainly seemed that there were some adjustments made. I don't know, scheme-wise, I don't know if it was just basically the players really got into it. But in the second half, as we'll discuss it, the defensive pressure really amped up. So that was nice to see in terms of a halftime adjustment, making Jake Rudock really kind of pay for dropping back to pass in the second half.
Yeah, I think one of the things is it goes back to that whole, it looks like they're almost playing a zone. Their wide receivers were finding that opening, that little cushion spot every single freaking time you turn around, and you were getting frustrated with that part. Like you said, it didn't seem like they were getting to the quarterback that much. It just seemed they were sitting back a little bit more, trying to stop the run first. And if they were able to stop the run, then they were going to start initiate maybe more of a man defense or something like that, which they seemed like they did in the second half, and they became more aggressive. It just seemed like the first half was, all right, we're just going to sit back, give you a little bit of a comfort area, not let you beat us deep and get a big playoff, see where you guys are at, and make the adjustment and get that aggressiveness going. And, yeah, they got that aggressiveness going because I think Bosa ended up actually calling or texting him. So I guess they used to play together, seeing if he was all right after the game, because that dude was just getting laid out in the second half.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk about. In the second half, Ohio State received the second half kickoff. There were several productive Ezekiel Elliott, JT Barrett runs. As you mentioned, Shannon, the Ohio State offensive coaching staff decided to go with an up-tempo scheme that really played into JT Barrett's skill set, culminated with a phenomenal 25-yard touchdown pass to Jalen Marshall to put Ohio State up 21-10. At that point, that pass, just speaking for myself, watching it at home with my wife and my good friend Tim, who's a listener of the podcast, I have to confess, when that pass was thrown, I really thought JT Barrett was throwing it to Curtis Samuel, who was directly in the same area. And the way that Jalen Marshall came down with that was very surprising to me. There was a great effort by Jalen Marshall to extend and come down with that pass, in my estimation.
I agree. You've seen that the players more so this year than what I've seen in the past, or maybe that's just something that Brady Choke kind of honed in on was, and you would think that with Harbaugh playing in it, knowing and understanding everything, it just seemed like Brady Hoke got his players up more for this game. Just could see that the Ohio State players, and a lot probably had to do with the loss of Sparty, but they were more focused, and players like Jalen Marshall were bound and determined to try to make big plays, and every time the ball was anywhere near him, he was doing his best and not screwing up, and it looked really good.
So Ohio State forced a punt, and here's where I thought, for all intents and purposes, the game was basically over, because the Buckeyes had a 16-play, 84-yard drive that burned 7 minutes and 5 seconds off the third quarter clock. Ohio State's now up 28-10 after JT Barrett had a touchdown run of 13 yards. At this point, the third quarter is essentially done, and that team up north is down 28-10. We were talking about it a moment ago. Ohio State, they really started pressuring Jake Rudock more in the second half. We're going to talk about the Joey Bosa one here momentarily. But there's a crushing sack where Jake Rudock was flushed to his left. He was being pursued by Josh Perry, who eventually got him, but Tyquan Lewis nailed Rudock low, and Perry took him up high, and
the sandwich.
That's what I'm saying. That was a surprise that Rudock got up. I truly am impressed by Rudock's toughness, because I thought he was knocked out of the game then. The team up north kicked a field goal to make it 28-13. So now we're in the fourth quarter. It seems as though Ohio State, they're content just running the ball with Elliott and Barrett. Barrett had a big pass to Michael Thomas, who had a quiet but solid game. Barrett had a pass for 38 yards. Ohio State scores on an Ezekiel Elliott 10-yard touchdown run to go up 35-13. That leads to the play that we've been talking about, that's been on the highlight reels, and it's going to be on the highlight reels for Ohio State for years to come. Jake Rudock crushed by former high school teammate Joey Bosa on a 6-yard sack. Watching it at home, I truly felt sorry for Jake Rudock, because he dropped back and his eyes were downfield, and you could see Joey Bosa coming, and he literally planted him into that turf like a tulip. I mean, it was on a 6-yard sack that led to backup Wilton Spite taking over at quarterback. And then the Wolverines had to give up the ball on downs. As I mentioned, Ohio State just kept running the ball. They were aided by a pass interference call. I believe it was they were throwing the ball to
that was a BS call.
On Jordan Lewis. Jordan Lewis wasn't. Or you think that was a BS call,
There was one where
on Ohio State.
Pass interference call. I think it was on Apple, where Butt was. Right. I think it was Butt was the receiver, and he's pushing off.
Yeah.
I'm like, how in the heck? What? I don't care.
Well, I think at this point, this one might have been a makeup call, but I think it was pretty blatant pass interference on Jordan Lewis. Ohio State then had JT Barrett. He ran 17 yards for a touchdown to put Ohio State up 42-13.
Oh, I have some breaking news here.
Go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt. Oh, wait, I haven't got confirmation. Nope, it's not true. I'm sorry. JT Barrett and Ezekiel Elliott are still running all over the campus of Michigan.
Because Ohio State, later in the game, had a punt partially blocked by Jehu Chesson. Play of the game, it would have been phenomenal if he had been able to take it in for the score. Joey Bosa intercepts Wilton Spite.
That was the greatest thing.
And going down the sideline, unfortunately not able to get into the end zone himself, but he had Ohio State in great scoring position at the Wolverines 9. At one point, and this is just my opinion, I'm sure Ohio State fans can let me know, they should have kept throwing for it. I didn't see the need. They threw a pass into the end zone for Michael Thomas that was incomplete. At that point, Ohio State essentially said, we're just going to run the ball. They gave the ball up on downs. The game was long over. Like I said, back at the end of the third quarter, when Ohio State, kind of like a python wrapping itself around its victim, they choked off the Wolverines in terms of the Wolverine defense was exhausted. Ohio State,
the fans were exhausted. Did you see the fire? Did you see the fire drill?
It was amazing. It was. I cannot believe watching the fans leaving in droves.
They did like Rutgers.
I will say this much. I will give credit to the fans of Rutgers for the fact that at least they were under the cover of the night. That was in broad daylight. watching, and I said it was like watching rats flee from a sinking ship, just because it was. I mean, it was embarrassing. And hats off to the fans that made the trek. My cousin John was among them.
Hats off to the fans that had the big sign.
They have to be the same.
Welcome home. Oh my Lord!
They have to be the same people that did that to Coach Rodriguez years ago. It looked like the same color scheme and the same. Awesome. The fact that they were able to get it in with all the security concerns, the fact that the Ohio chant was able to be loud and proud in the stadium. I
just love that.
I mean,
yes.
We were talking about some historical perspective. Ohio State racked up 369 yards on the ground with Ezekiel Elliott rushing for 214 yards. JT Barrett,
like I said, they're still not done yet.
Yeah, JT Barrett added 139 yards himself. The historical part of a few things, I'm sure our listeners are aware of this. Ezekiel Elliott passed Eddie George to become Ohio State's second all-time leading rusher. Hopefully he will get an invitation to New York City for the Heisman Trophy presentation. I'm not saying that he's going to win it, but I think he is more than deserving. And here's the part that I've been savoring to talk about. This victory, I looked it up, kind of called upon my inner Jack Park, Ohio State historian powers. Looked it up. Ohio State with a 42-13 victory over that team up north, a 29-point victory in Ann Arbor. The last time Ohio State defeated that team up north so convincingly was the year 1961 when Woody Hayes was the head coach, and he had an assistant coach on his staff by the name of Bo Schembechler.
You know, that guy that they worship that never won them a national championship?
Exactly. But he learned well. He learned well, at least. And in his autobiography, as somebody who is the proud owner of it, I have so much respect for Coach Schembechler that he actually says the words, "I loved Woody Hayes." So
yes, they were definitely great friends.
Oh, they were. There was tremendous respect there. So before we get into talking about the playoffs, I would be remiss, I think we would be remiss, if we did not congratulate all of the Ohio State players named to all of the Big Ten teams. Specifically, what I'd like to rattle off here in terms of on defense, Joey Bosa, Raekwon McMillan, Josh Perry, Von Bell, they were all named first team, all Big Ten defense. Defensive lineman Adolphus Washington, cornerback Eli Apple, linebacker Darren Lee were named to the second team. Cameron Johnston somehow was named to the second team as a punter. On the offensive side of the ball, offensive lineman Taylor Decker, offensive lineman Pat Elflein, running back Ezekiel Elliott were all named to the first team offense.
And Taylor Decker got offensive lineman of the year.
Exactly. One of these things that's puzzling to me, wide receiver Michael Thomas was named to the Big Ten third team offense. I find it very difficult and perplexing to believe that there are other wide receivers that much better than Michael Thomas for him to be named third team, but I digress there. Center Jacoby Bourne was also named third team, as well as left guard Billy Price. Getting back to the players of the year, congratulations to Ezekiel Elliott for not only being named the running back of the year in the Big Ten, but also the offensive player of the year. What was perplexing is that Joey Bosa was named the defensive lineman of the year, but not the defensive player of the year.
Yes.
And in a continuing saga, the 36-year drought of coach of the year, as Iowa's Kirk Ferentz named coach of the year.
He deserved it.
He deserved it, but they just may as well just say
it's the non-Ohio
State coach.
Right.
So at this point,
as long as Jim Harbaugh didn't win it, I don't care, because my biggest thing was how everybody said Jim Harbaugh's turned this program around. Again, you can't come into a program that is sanctioned for a whole year without a bowl, has nothing to play for. You didn't go out and get graduate transfer talent, basically, in order to restockpile your team, and you went and took that team to 12-0 record after going 6-7 the year before. That year, if anything, could have been, coach of the year. Last year, 3 quarterbacks, coach of the year. You don't want to give it to Ohio State? Fine, just don't give it to that guy because he doesn't deserve it.
You are listening to Men of the Scarlet and Gray podcast here on Buckeye Sports Radio, the Sporto channel.
What are my chances?
Not good.
You mean not good like 1 out of 100?
I'd say more like 1 out of a million.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
Yeah!
All right, let's talk about the playoff rankings. The top 4, for those of you who may not be aware, going into the final weekend of the regular college football season, ranked number 1, Clemson, number 2, Alabama, number 3, Oklahoma,
yay,
and number 4, Iowa,
yay,
number 5, Michigan State, Ohio State 6th, Stanford 7th. Now, let's talk about the games on Saturday that, if you're not planning on watching them, at least you want to keep up to date on Twitter or maybe on your mobile device, just to kind of get an idea as to what the scores are. One of the earlier games, and this one, unfortunately, for Ohio State fans, as Shannon booed, Florida versus Alabama.
Overrated.
Ranked second. That's a
Overrated.
Saturday afternoon, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on CBS. The reason why this one, if you're going to miss any of them, this is the one you probably want to, because Florida, give them credit for winning their division. However, offensively, last weekend against Florida State, they were beaten 27-2. So offensively, they're very, very challenged. They're going up against a solid Alabama defense, maybe overrated overall as a team, but I find it highly unlikely that Florida will be able to pull off the upset that Ohio State fans desperately need and want in order to get the Buckeyes into the playoff conversation.
I agree. As much as I want Florida to win this game, just based on the simple fact of I've been going at it with SEC fans, which, oh my God, I've never seen a fan base where you throw facts and stats at them and the only thing that they keep throwing up is we're the most dominant conference. Nobody else has won this many, blah, 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 blah. Hello, History Channel's over. Okay? You, Alabama, have not played anybody this year. You want to come out Ohio State and say we haven't played anybody? Fine. But I'm going to tell you something right now. The team that we lost to that was ranked was definitely a higher ranking. I mean, they're number 5 ranked right now. And they're still ranked higher than the team that you lost to. So, I mean, you only played 2 ranked teams, I believe, and we only played 2 ranked teams. So don't give me this crap that you had a harder schedule than Ohio State. And there's no FCS school that Ohio State played. None. Zip. Zero. We don't need that before our rivalry game. It just drives me absolutely crazy hearing their fans and the idiocy. I love what Colin Cowherd came out and said, blasting the SEC and everything. Nothing I would love more, nothing, than Florida taking out Alabama, which would take out the whole SEC conversation and narrative in this, and you would have 2 Big Ten teams possibly in the playoffs.
Speaking of FCS teams, a team that Ohio State will be definitely pulling for, and you're going to be wanting to try and find it on Saturday night, ABC, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Number 1 ranked Clemson versus number 10 ranked North Carolina for the ACC championship. We'll get back.
Did you just call North Carolina FCS team?
Well, we're going to talk about that here in a minute. We're going to talk about that in greater detail.
Oh, that's right. They played 2 teams. That's right.
2. Stanford, which is ranked 7th, versus USC, ranked 20th. Also on Saturday night on ESPN at 7:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Pac-12 championship. Probably the game that I will be watching the least. If you had told me this a couple weeks ago, I would have been completely shocked. But I'll be flipping around probably between those 2 other games. I'll watch this last one just because I'm anxious to see Michigan State, ranked number 5, versus number 4 ranked Iowa, Saturday night on Fox at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Big Ten championship. The reason why I rattled off and you just kind of alluded to it. North Carolina, at present, ranked number 10 due to the fact that they have played and beaten 2 FCS teams. The original...
And lost to South Carolina.
Exactly. In the original 2015 Ohio State schedule, up until a couple years ago, in week 1, Ohio State was supposed to play North Carolina. The game was moved to 2018 at North Carolina's request, and then ultimately dropped from the schedule. But no. According to everybody in ACC country, Ohio State canceled the game. Yeah. Well, let's not put facts out there. Here's the reality of it. Is in order for, and this is just my opinion, if you want to get mad at me, because I know that a lot of our listeners last night on Twitter just seeing it saying how they believe this is going to happen is, I think there's a considerable amount of belief that if North Carolina can pull off the upset of Clemson, that will automatically get Ohio State in. I'm of the belief, and I'm more along the lines of, I think of Kirk Herbstreit, who was on the playoff show last night for ESPN.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that Ohio State needs not only North Carolina to upset Clemson, I believe USC needs to beat Stanford, because at number 7 and Ohio State number 6, and I realize a lot of our fans are going to say, well, Chip, Stanford has 2 losses. I understand that.
But to still be a Pac-12 champion.
Pac-12 champion, plus the fact, think back to last year, and a lot of Ohio State fans have either forgotten it or are choosing to forget it. Going into the weekend, TCU was ranked number 3.
Mm-hmm.
They thrashed, I believe it was Iowa State, and by the end of the weekend, they were ranked 6th by the playoff committee.
But also at the same time, Ohio State went and put a 59-0 whooping on Wisconsin.
That's correct. That is correct.
So a lot's going to deal with, too, the score of the Michigan State-Iowa game. That's going to play a lot into it, believe it or not. Is it going to be a close game, or is it going to be a blowout? I mean, if Michigan State goes in there and they blow out Iowa, that's going to show a lot as far as knocking Iowa completely out and opening up the eyes of, okay, Ohio State lost to Michigan State by 3 points.
On the last play.
Right. And then they go and crush Michigan, who lost only by 7 points on a crazy play to Michigan State. So there's that whole dynamic in this. Yeah, once again, this whole we don't play anybody. But these 2 teams, we just annihilated Michigan and finally came together as a unit for that game. But the Michigan State game, only to lose by 3 points. And you have to know, based on a simple fact of, like we were talking all year, the offensive play calling, the this, the that, Ohio State never showed up, basically. So if it's a huge blowout, that might open up a little bit of a door if, say, there's just a Clemson loss and Stanford still wins. I still think Stanford has a better opportunity to jump, even if there's a blowout. Like you said, we need like a Clemson and a Stanford to both lose, but there is a very good possibility with even 2 losses that Stanford's going to be able to jump Ohio State.
Another great point that Kirk Herbstreit made that I retweeted, and I don't have it directly in front of me, but it was, in essence, one of Herbstreit's point was, he asked the question, I would like to believe that the committee has to be asking themselves, which of these teams would I not want to play? Meaning, would you want Ohio State? Do you think that Ohio State would do well against Clemson? Would Ohio State do well against Alabama, against Oklahoma, against, I'm just going to use Iowa just because right now with time, or the idea of, I guess, like, if the playoffs were to start, let me put it another way. Would you prefer to see Ohio State against Alabama, or do you think Alabama would do better against Stanford, or do you think Alabama would do better against North Carolina? Like, those are the kind of those are the kind of questions that hopefully that they're asking. It's very difficult. The reason I'm kind of stammering over it, it's very difficult as an Ohio State fan to sit and say, well, absolutely, I do believe Ohio State's one of the 4 best teams in college football. Talent-wise, coaching-wise, absolutely. The problem is, and JT Barrett even said it tonight after practice, is that the players, the coaches have only themselves to blame by putting themselves in this position. They no longer control their destiny. So
exactly,
as an Ohio State fan, and I'm asking this of all of our listening audience, is to just kind of relax, because it's completely beyond the coaches and players, Ohio State coaches and players' control. Enjoy watching the games, cheer, root for, as we said, root for Florida, even though I think that's highly unlikely, root for North Carolina, which, from what I understand, the betting line is down to 5 points, so that one could be interesting. Root for USC, which you never know. Stanford beat USC earlier in the season, but we'll just have to kind of see where everything is at the end of the night. If all of the teams that are ranked presently ahead of Ohio State, if they all win, Ohio State, what they're looking at in terms of a possible bowl berth, The Rose Bowl or the Fiesta Bowl?
I'm hoping myself, a lot of this is going to depend on who wins the Big Ten championship, the point spread, and next week, who's ranked higher. If Iowa comes out and wins this, and I know a lot of folks have sat there and said there's no way that Michigan State could be ranked above Ohio State because Michigan State won the head-to-head, I will check you and say, then why is Northwestern ahead of Michigan? But I digress on that. My biggest thing for all these games, number one, USC, they're going to be playing a little bit different now. Their coach that has been an interim coach is now officially the head coach. So a lot of the players are going to be playing with a lot more pride that what they've done and turned everything around, that you're playing for him. It's going to be completely different, and hopefully you're going to see something a lot better. The Florida-Alabama, as much as I love to see Florida win it, just said offensive woes. I think that there's there's at least 5 teams right now in the nation that are worthy of playoff spots. And unfortunately, I'm resigned to the fact that because Ohio State lost to Michigan State, that Ohio State's going to be one of the teams that are going to be left out. Just going to face the facts, and I'm hoping that worst case scenario, we go to a Rose Bowl.
It's time now for Ask Matsang. What's your question?
Can I kick it? Can I kick it? Can I kick it?
Let's get into our Ask Matsang questions. So, this is, I think, on a positive from our loyal listener at OSU Girl 47.
Now she wants to hit us with the positive.
I think this is. She asked the question, if we believe this was Urban's best coaching leading up to and during the game. I'm going to say that it's the second best. And the only reason I'm deferring behind this one is because of the circumstances from last year, the fact that JT Barrett had his ankle broken during the game, everything that happened with Costa Karageorge, going against a ranked and favored Wisconsin team with a Heisman Trophy candidate and Melvin Gordon at the time. I would say that was probably the best coaching in the time frame that he had. It was a comparable time frame, but I just think the emotional roller coaster, that's just my opinion. I think this definitely ranks very close as a second.
Yeah, I have to agree. I definitely have to agree. You've seen more fire in the players this year for any of the games, though, that Urban's been the coach. I believe he's the first coach to start off 4-0 against them. Is that correct?
4-0? Yeah, absolutely.
And then just one of them to be against Jim Harbaugh, his first game. Oh, that's the greatest. And you knew for the simple fact of Fox Sports going around with their little khaki bus, being like Harbaugh. Everybody's sitting there praising this guy. You knew, especially after the loss to Sparty, that there was no way that Urban Meyer was even going to entertain the thought of people trying to put Harbaugh in the same class as him. Like I said, Harbaugh's never won a national championship. He might have gone to the Super Bowl or national championship, NFL championships, or conference, whatever you want to call them. He hasn't won the big game. Urban has. Hands down, best coach.
So, a couple other questions that at OSU Girl had, at OSU Girl 47, I should say. If Ohio State doesn't get in the playoffs, with the bowl scenario, as we mentioned, the likely possibility is the Rose Bowl. However, with the Fiesta Bowl being up there as well, and Ohio State, let's say that all the teams ranked ahead win, so that could possibly, as you said, it really depends on if Iowa wins and what the Rose Bowl will do. But the possibility of an Ohio State-Stanford Rose Bowl or as Chris Spielman said the other day on the Fiesta Bowl, an Ohio State Notre Dame Fiesta Bowl.
Yeah, there's a lot of good possibility of both of those happening. Like, it's the biggest thing with the Big Ten championship game is whoever loses, are they going to be ranked higher than Ohio State or not? If it's a close game and Iowa comes out and they're ranked above Ohio State, then Iowa's going to go to the Rose Bowl for the first time since, I believe, sometime in the 1980s.
Actually, I think it was 1991. I thought.
Was it 91?
I thought I saw something the other day about 1991.
Yeah, so I mean, it's been a long time, and which is, for some reason, I was thinking, and I totally forgot. I don't know why. Maybe it's just trying to blank that whole era of the Terrell Pryor. Nothing against him. It's just that whole incident that happened, unfortunately. But I thought for the last time that Ohio State's been to the Rose Bowl was in 1997 against Jake the Snake.
No, it was that was that unfortunate incident took place after that 2010 Rose Bowl, but
like I said, it was all downhill after this. That's why I might have blanked it out.
I understand. So something else that is kind of at OSU Girl 47, another great question was she asked if Michigan State didn't block the punt against that team up north when they played, would Ohio State now be in the Big Ten championship game? Doug Lesmaurice of the Cleveland Plain Dealer actually took that angle on this past Sunday after the game. The unfortunate reality of the situation is, yes, that's the case, because what would have happened is then in that case, then Michigan State would have had 2 losses within the conference, counting on the fact that Nebraska with that fluky bad call and that team up north, then Ohio State would have defeated that team up north head to head, which would have given them the Big Ten East division title if that had not taken place. But who's to say, how these things are going to turn out? If anyone would have anticipated that Ohio State was going to lose on a last-second field goal to Michigan State in their last home game of the 2015 season, I mean, who could have predicted that's how that game was going to end?
Oh, bottom line, no matter what, it was another great season, a lot of close calls. I know when Michigan State lost to Nebraska, everybody said that it was bound to happen because Michigan State wasn't putting a total game together. The same thing could be said about Ohio State. Another great season. Last year, we weren't expecting anything. They turned around and win the national championship. This year, all the weight of the world's put on them. It's hard to win back-to-back national championships. If we get into the playoffs, hey, nobody's going to be happier than every single fan in Buckeye Nation. But at the same time, I'm not putting all my hopes and all my eggs in the basket and getting upset next weekend. I'm looking at it as a possible Rose Bowl, getting a good bowl out of it. These seniors are going to walk away with possibly one of the best classes to ever play at Ohio State, with the 4 gold pants, the Big Ten, or the national championship, the Sugar Bowl. I think they've only lost 1 bowl game, and that would have been
the Orange Bowl.
Yeah, the Orange Bowl. So you got a shot of having basically, we'll say, two bowl wins and a national championship and 4 gold pants. I mean, there's not many classes that could say that.
Great way to go out.
I think the Troy Smith class might be the only one that could say that. Not sure, but I'd have to go back and check.
So last question, and this is from Gio, and he asked the question, if North Carolina upsets Clemson and everyone else wins, will the committee pick the Buckeyes number 4? I am not anticipating that. I think that if North Carolina upsets Clemson and Stanford wins, and I just think that Stanford, their strength of schedule, even with the 2 losses, I think Ohio State not being the conference champion, I hope I'm wrong, but I think that Stanford would vault over Ohio State and get that number 4 spot. That's just my opinion.
I agree, and there's also a good possibility that, unfortunately, even being at rank number 10, that North Carolina could vault all the way up into the 4th spot. No matter how remote that could be, what if they go in there and this is just a total thrashing and Clemson doesn't show up for the game and they win by like 20, 30 points?
Right.
You just beat the number 1 team in the nation. You think that's not going to take notice? They're going to be like, all right, yep, you're number 4, and you are the ACC Conference Championship winner, so, yep, you get to jump them. Which would ultimately smack in the face of the whole idea of strength of schedule, out of conference games and everything, because now you're rewarding them for their 2 FCS wins.
Like I said, we'll just have to sit back and enjoy. Just a reminder for all of our listeners, if they're not aware, the ESPN College Football Playoff Selection Show is on at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sunday, December 6th. Something to be aware of. We've been talking about the Rose Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl. Those bowl games will not be announced immediately. There's a 3 p.m. announcement time for the Peach, Rose, Fiesta, and Sugar Bowls. So at 12 o'clock, Ohio State fans will know, depending on the results, obviously, of Saturday night. We're all hoping for the upsets, but don't turn on your TV at 12 o'clock on Sunday wanting to know, okay, is Ohio State in the Rose or the Fiesta? If things don't shake out the way that we're all hoping, probably won't know that until later in the afternoon, from what I understand from what Doug Laveries of the Cleveland Plain Dealer wrote earlier this week. That's a 3 p.m. announcement time.
Yeah. Just enjoy the games.
Yeah.
It's been a great year. Just take it however we can get it. Enjoy the ride. We've enjoyed the ride this year, and this has been one of the quickest seasons that I can remember since I've enjoyed college football as a young kid. I don't remember a season going as quick because it seems like we just started last week.
Absolutely.
Want to make a programming note for everybody real quick. This being the last of the regular season, we will still be doing our football podcasts when Chip's available to come on during the off season. I know we're going to do one next week. We'll talk about where Ohio State landed, all that kind of stuff. I also want to preview the second biggest rivalry in college sports, the Army-Navy game. Go Navy, beat Army. But during the off season and leading up to the bowl, after the bowl game and everything, we're going to try to get guests on to interview, talk about recruiting, maybe go back and rehash some things. I'm going to try myself personally, really start to study some game film and everything, look at the possibility, because from what I'm hearing and understanding, you might as well go ahead and pack your bags on Chris Ash like we were afraid of. I know talk of Syracuse, and now I'm hearing Rutgers is knocking on the door, and they might even be knocking on the door of Ed Warner. So there's a lot of components that are going to be going on that we talked about, how it's going to be an interesting offseason. This show will still be going on, and we're going to be doing 2 shows a week because I'm going to be going with Andrew doing basketball, even though they're not doing that great right now, but we're still going to keep going. Just want to let everybody know.
So speaking of the show, Shannon, how can people listen to this fine podcast going forward?
You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Podbean, TuneIn, YouTube, basically anywhere that podcasts are able to be played. Still working and trying to figure out iHeartRadio. Whenever Google comes out with theirs, we've already been accepted on that. So just go into your search bar and type in Men of the Scarlet and Gray, and we should pop up there for you.
And for anyone interested in finding your work, how can they reach out or find your information?
They can find my work on menofthescarletandgray.com. Also started up a new site, which I'm slowly but surely trying to build up and get going, burningriverchronicles.com. Mostly going to be Cleveland sports stuff. The tiers of Cleveland sports fans can't even put out a Burning River, so we got to roll with that some and everything that's going on there. You could hit me up on Twitter at smsummers84. You could also reach out to the show on Twitter at Motsag Podcast, or like us on Facebook, Motsag Podcast.
You can find my work on menofthescarletandgray.com. I can also be reached on Twitter at Chipminnick, MINNICH. I'm also a contributor to athlonsports.com, and I periodically write on my own blog from themindofminnick.blogspot.com. For Shannon Summers, this is the Men of the Scarlet and Gray podcast. Thank you for listening. Go Bucks.
Go Bucks.